We live in a world built for reversibility. Everything from relationships to subscriptions to jobs, everything can be undone. And which is why I've always been intrigued by people who get tattoos done. I always wonder what prompts them to go for something so permanent and how do they commit to getting a tattoo done for their life. Which is when I met my friend Carl, and Carl has recently released a very interesting study around tattoos. And he met about 10 people. He sat down with them, really listened to their stories end to end about tattoos, and which is why I wanted to hear more from Carl. Carl, welcome to Deep Fried Thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, my
Right.
first question for you today is, do you have a tattoo?
I do have a tattoo. I have two tattoos. I've got a map of Vietnam here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing the gun show because I don't have any guns. And then I've got like a map of Ireland here. And the reasoning being that if I ever lost my passport, I could either go back home to Ireland or to where my wife's parents are from, which is Vietnam. But both countries to me are very important. And if we're blessed to have kids, I always thought the idea would be nice to be able to hug my children and say, this is where you're from. You're from these two different cultures, and they're going to embrace you from that. But I wanted something, and I had many different ideas of the type of tattoo I wanted, but I came to that realization that I'd always remember my origin story and then my update. You know, I'm European hardware and Asian software for so many years here. And I designed the in the Ireland one, you can't really see it, but it's like the Celtic design, like the never ending circle type of idea. So I put a lot of thought into it, and I probably waited around 12 years, honestly, before I got them. And I got both pretty much at the same time. It was great. From the moment the needle hit my skin, it was this feeling of this is what I should have done. Like I'm in the right place and this is the right feeling. And this is good. I just felt like it's almost like a lack of noise in my head. It was just like, this is good. I mean, it took a long time, but and sometimes I find, I don't know if you ever find this, but you can post rationalize things. I
Mm-hmm.
can say I'm a customer experience researcher, and I can think, wow, I learned so much about customer experience when I worked in 7-Eleven 30 years ago. But back then I had no idea that I was learning about customer experience. I was just doing that job. But my grandfather was like a merchant navy sailor, and he was quite old. I'm the youngest of a family where there's quite a distance between the eldest and the youngest me. So my grandfather was already like in his 80s by the time I could recognize him as a person that I could have conversations with. And he was covered in tattoos as a result of that, being a Navy guy. So I remember him pulling his arm because you get wrinkled when you get old. So he had a big crucifix tattoo, but he'd have to pull back the skin to show it. And he had like a few on his arms and on his hands. But it was only when I got the tattoo in that moment of the needle hitting the skin that all of those memories came back. And I was like, started to then reassemble a jigsaw that had sort of come apart over the years, because that's generally what happens with memory. So yeah, it was sort of fascinating. So I wanted to talk to other people about it. I just thought, well, I want to talk to people about it. If I have that, I'd like to hear other people's stories.
And that is exactly where I was headed, Carl. So, is your personal experience one of the triggers for you to go and study and speak to other folks who've got tattoos like you?
A little bit. I mean, I don't want this to sound like a pity party for all ethnographic qualitative researchers, but a lot of the time, we're asked to interview people on behalf of brands. And rightly, what the brand needs to know always takes precedent. So like in a focus group, right, you get 8 strangers or ideally 6 or 4 strangers. And you have an icebreaker in a discussion guide, and it's like 2 minutes. And it's like, okay, we learned a little bit about you. Now let's get straight into this product or this service or this concept. So you do that and you do it, for 2 hours, and then you do that maybe 8 or 10 times. And at the end of it, you get a lot of good feedback on the product or the service, but you know nothing about the people in the room other than they were women or they were a certain age or they were a certain gender. So you have an idea, but you
Mhm.
don't have any real clue. So the yearning part of the researcher is, you do have those conversations, and sometimes you have an extended warm up or you talk to the consumers after the fact. And then when you come to write the report, incidental things during the conversation don't get put into it because they weren't on topic, or they weren't pertinent to the business decision that had to be made. So I sort of feel sometimes it's like if you're an editor for a movie, and you watch the trailer, you watch the whole movie, and then there's all these discarded frame, and you find all these things, and there's a completely different movie to be made. And it's similar when you have those type of conversations. So I had that always in the back of my mind that I just want to interview people just for the sake of it. So to cut a long story short, I'm in a cab in Singapore. I just like moved here 5 years ago. So I'm literally in a grab. And I know Singapore because I've done research here over the years a lot. So I'm in the cab and I'm thinking, wow, this guy is like heavily tatted and he's an older guy, like 60s or so. I said to him, "Oh, is this socially acceptable?" So I just wanted to sense check that with the Grab driver because they're always the best people in the new city to talk to and find out.
Yep.
And he was like, "No, it's normal." He said it's getting a bit more normal than I like it because he was sort of bemoaning the fact that a lot of people were having tattoos who were younger, but sort of didn't
Hmm.
know what they were doing, and they were lowering the fiscal value of a tattoo just by doing it. So how, as it happens when you take a grab, you've got like 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes where you have a deep conversation with somebody. And it just
Sure.
made me think, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to interview other people. And I asked, it's like, can I interview you? And that's sort of how it started. I want to continue this conversation outside of the parameters of the 10-minute taxi ride, which again echoed my experience in focus group rooms or in-depth interviews where you're like, the time is up, but I don't want to stop talking to you. So I thought, okay, well, there's no brand, there's no product, there's no service. Let's just talk about tattoos then and see where it leads, and see where it goes, because there's bound to be something of interest.
Yeah.
Bound
No,
to be.
I love the story of exploration and going in with no hypothesis, just with a pure interest of listening to this person's experiences and seeing what threads it pulls. Love that. So, when you met these folks, is there a story or something you learned that surprised you, something you did not expect?
I sort of had this preconditioned idea about tattoos and people who wear tattoos that maybe they're a little bit on the edge, not on the edge of society, right? But, slightly different in how they think and how they
Hmm.
do things. And maybe I was projecting, maybe that's why I have tattoos. Maybe I wanted other
Sure.
people to
Yeah.
immediately go, hey, he's one of the cool kids.
Or you're the
Because I
rebel.
do, yeah, maybe. I don't think it was rebel. It was more like I imagined the reason why they had a tattoo would be the same reason why they may wear Doc Martens, particularly because I can go. I've traveled the world, and if I see somebody wearing Doc Martens, I know in my heart that we could be friends immediately. I just know it. I can't prove that, but I would be 100% certain that's true. Mainly because Doc Martens are horribly painful experiences. I have Doc Marten sliders now, and I wear them around Singapore, and they still cut my feet to ribbons in certain parts of my
Mhm.
foot. And I got used to it because I love them, and they will last me for 20 years. I've got Doc Martens I've got for 25 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. Now that I've said it out loud, I'm like, that is crazy. I should just get to slip on Skechers and be done with it. But it was this idea that sometimes things are sort of worth a little bit of pain or whatever. So what surprised me really was how the depth beneath that. Every single person had a good reason for why they had their tattoo, and every single person sort of delayed the time before getting it. It wasn't spontaneous in how they acted on it, and they'd really been thinking about it for a long time. So, I was hoping there'd be like some funny stories like, oh, I got this one in Hong Kong and I sort of regret it. I was drunk, blah, 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 whatever. Just because I thought maybe that would be interesting to have in a report. But there was a complete absence of regret, to be fair, because people have thought about it quite deeply. So what really surprised me uh, ultimately was how I'm either blessed or cursed with having very good memory for details of conversations that I've had with people over the years that I've interviewed because I carry them with me. And maybe that's part of the Irish culture, where in our culture, there's a person in each village or tribe, at least there was back in those days, called the Shanachie, and that person would be the custodian of stories. Before there was libraries or written text, and in some
Mhm.
cases during various occupations that my country had, our language was forbidden and not allowed to be practiced. So we had to, find poetry or music or just stories to communicate. And I think in China they call that talk story, which I found out again, another digression, I'm sorry, but I found out that's a common culture. So for me, the idea then, what surprised me was how deeply these people felt, not just about their tattoo, but just how deeply they felt about things, even something like StarHub or something like an ASICS, they really thought deeply about things. They all had old souls, let's say, and they all seemed to be very giving people to other people in their family and in their cohort. But for themselves, there was this hint of caution and pause before they indulged themselves. But then once they got the tattoo, it's like, okay, at least now I can start a journey of sorts. And if I need it, I can reference it, or I can feel it, or I can look at it. But that's the permanence. And I finally did something for myself. And in a way, it's like, I'm worth it.
Yeah, no, I find it fascinating, Carl, because when I think of someone with a tattoo, the first idea in my mind is also a rugged biker or someone who's extremely rugged, and like pain is not a factor at all, like impervious to it. But clearly, what you experience, and the more I hear you, it feels like that is just a stereotype, and that is something you had to shed while you went through with these conversations, these stories. There is a whole period of wait. Almost everyone you spoke with, and including your own story, you wanted to get a tattoo done. And then there's a huge period of variable time before you actually get inked. And I
Yeah.
wanted to do a deep dive on that one. What goes in the mind of this person who's still marinating on that idea? And what is typically the trigger for someone to go and get this tattoo done?
I think it's a combination of different things. Sometimes it is societal or family. I think Kartini was like, because she's Muslim, having your body marked apparently not good in how some Muslims may profess their faith or practice it. I think that was for her. It was like, I really want this for me, and if I do it, I'm gonna get flack. Pei as well, who's actually a tattoo artist as well as being a respondent. Her family are calling her gangster because she has
Wow.
them, and she actually used to cover them up for a while with concealer and foundation, and she stopped because she realized after a while, I'm just not being myself. So I think the delay sometimes is being respectful for the people in your life who are close to you, how it's going to affect them. Sometimes it's also, which I really like about it, if I post rationalize myself, I'm like, oh, because I'm so discerning and fussy, I had to wait until I found the exact design I wanted, until the inspiration struck me. So, like for Anna, she just always had this idea in her head because she loved her cats. She sort of brought up in New Zealand, is Korean, had all these fond memories of her cats back home, and sort of carried that around with her as well. Yeah, you're carrying this physical, mental memory of things like we all are. So that period of waiting, sometimes it was purposely to pluck up the courage. Sometimes it was, I want to wait until I get the right inspiration. Sometimes it was just happenstance. So for Anna, she was in Thailand. She did see the tattoo parlor right at the moment where she was having that memory of something that was very dear to her. And she thought, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get a small lithograph type of cat on my ankle that I can't see it all the time, but if I need to and I see it, I can have all those memories come flooding back. So it's almost like, imagine you're carrying around, which we all do, on your phone, all your pictures in your library, right? And there's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
Nobody would say that's weird. It's the same
Yep.
thing, but it's on your skin. You know, that's basically what it is. And it's not uncommon. Sometimes what Vibes, a great name, by the way, his name literally Vibes. He was saying, when you go to places like Thailand or Sri Lanka or anywhere in Southeast Asia, sometimes the wait is the most important thing. You have to travel 2.5 hours to get to the waterfall. You go to Halong Bay, before you get to the caves, you've got to go on that period of water where there's literally nothing except the caves in front of you, the dock behind you, the water around you, and yourself and your thoughts. And that's absolutely great. Or it's terrible, depending on what mood you're in. So the fact that we do have to wait for some things, or sometimes we should wait for things, I think is the thread for this particular cohort. But I think it's something that we all have an experience of. We don't get things instantly, really, except for maybe skip intro or skip 10 minutes of
Right.
Netflix. The only time a consumer has control. Most of the time, we're in a period of waiting at the bus stop, in the supermarket, getting onto a train, whatever it is. There is a period of waiting. So I think these particular people were a little bit more okay with that because they knew it wouldn't be instant gratification, but the gratification when it came would be exactly what they wanted. No regrets. I've done this now, you know? So that sort of struck me, not even while I was doing the interviews and not even immediately writing the report. Sometimes these insights, they pop up after the fact.
Yeah, and I think there's this insight in your report, but which says that a choice, if it costs nothing to make, is not worth defending. Which is, a tattoo hurts. Sometimes you're going against the grain of what's convention, and yet you're making that choice, and which is why you would defend that choice for tattoo forever. It felt almost counterintuitive to me because every company we hear of is trying to remove that friction of choosing them. And here you are in your study sharing how that friction is what makes this entire experience worth living.
I think that's fair in the world we would live in marketing and product marketing and basically selling products, right? I think that's normal because we do want to get to the fastest answer quickly. That's just part of capitalism. You don't want to have too much lag in a system. But that's fine for running a
Sure.
business. And of course, you have to do that. But I think sometimes since the internet became a big thing, it was always promising, hyper personalization. It was promising the ability to code sentiment, all this stuff. And it has to a certain degree. But what it's also done, if you look at the margins or if you talk to people in real life, it sort of truncated everything to the mean. Everything reverts to the mean. It, of course, is a mathematical signal. But it's true. So know exactly the optimal frictionless way to do something, but then it just becomes pure generic vanilla, which
Okay.
people don't necessarily want. So when, some of these guys, they're all sort of Gen Zs, more or less. And one of the things that they kept saying to me was like, nobody knows who we are, but they have a really strong opinion on who we are. But
Sure. Yeah.
they never think to ask us. Even if it's buying something, they'll serve us an advert, something we just bought, or they'll make an assumption that we believe in something because we all believe that way, typical Gen Z, and they never stop to
Mhm.
think and pause and wait. And that's what I really struck me as important because we're trying to optimize for a situation that doesn't really exist because in most of our lives things take a little bit of time to percolate and to grow. If I was being a purist, brands should introduce a little bit of friction into it because it's useful. Maybe we should design some friction, or maybe we should just make things a little bit worth waiting for. Because again, in real life, for example, if you want to be a musician, you have to learn how to read music and you have to learn how to play the
There's
piano. If you want
there's
to be a
pain,
ballet
there's
dancer,
grunt work.
exactly. If you like to cook for people, hey, there's prep, and prep
Yep.
sucks unless you're okay with prep. So in a lot of things we're saying that the weight is good. Again with the tattoos, it's okay. It's acceptable if there's an intent or a reason behind it. But if the whole point of a frictionless experience is to just push vanilla product or ads or this or that, then we're missing the point. I would say we're missing the point of being able to hit a target based on something that wasn't so obvious. And then who are you going to be loyal to? Like who do you care? Who's the new Doc Martens? Where's Lush? Who nobody. It's just
Probably not.
store brand stuff. And again, that's the reality.
Yeah, I mean, I think on that question of letting some things take its own course. There was a couple of tattoo designs were such that the person who had the tattoo had a certain meaning attached to it. And often I think there was this one which was written in Mandarin. So no one else could understand what's written except for the person who got the tattoo for most
Yeah.
parts. And then, so there's this meaning that a person attaches to the tattoo and then lets it go out in the world. And often it's misunderstood or not understood at all. And I'm wondering if did you find that surprising, the fact that you are willing to let go of some things which is so meaningful to you and could mean almost anything to anybody else? That sense of
I,
loss of control.
no, in a perverse way, not in a pejorative version of that word.
Mhm.
It's sort of like it's sort of like you're playing a trick on people in a sense
Hmm.
that they think they know everything about you because of that, and you allow them to make that assumptions.
Sure.
I think with Vedant it was aham. I have to write this down. Aham Brahmasmi. It's a Sanskrit, and I think it just means around the idea of the divine lives within me. So he purposely had that because he wanted that. He believes in that. He's not particularly religious, but he believes in that. So when he sees it, it's like, a vitamin C shot for his soul, he
Hmm.
gets it. But some of the religious elders that he worked and lived with, they were like, who do you think you are? You think you're God? How dare you? And he's like, you're misinterpreting it. So he sort of wanted to invite sometimes a little bit of friction based on the knowledge that maybe somebody might willfully or wrongfully misinterpret it. It invited him to defend the position and therefore defend his soul, therefore defend the whole world in which he lives. And it didn't
Hmm.
always happen. He wasn't like walking down the street and people are chasing him going, who do
Sure.
you think you are? But it happened enough, and it's private in public. It's so private, but everyone can see it.
So, Carl, just a couple of more things before we wrap up this beautiful conversation. When you did this study, you went in with no assumptions. But ultimately, the lens that you're trying to apply or the lens you hope to apply is how can a brand or a company truly understand, read this, and be able to use what they learned from here in spirit, not just as part of a PowerPoint presentation. So, what is the best case scenario if a brand was to truly sit down, read your report? What do you hope they do differently?
I would just hope that they trust the process. When I started in qualitative research, Mary Bard, uh, wow, a hero of NOP at that time. And, other people, Sharon de Moldenberg, Liz Montgomery, tended to be women, funnily enough. Yeah, the topic guides that we had were generally 5 topics because the brand would sort of trust that you want to explore these topics. And at the back of the mind, which we all understood, telephone interviewers, execs, whatever, is that every single survey that you do in the world is about acquisition and retention at some point. That's all. That's all it
Sure.
is. So if you're talking to a customer, how do you keep them as a customer? Talking to somebody who isn't, how do you get them to be? I mean, at heart, that's what it is. So if you are well trained in the skill of interviewing or gathering data, then you don't really need more than what do you want me to find out? And the blessing that you can either have 10 seconds and find that same thing out, or 2 hours and find out a lot more. What's happened, because it was what was a bit onerous to call people up, you could
Mhm.
do online. We sort of started to stack the deck a little bit. So let's ask a lot of questions. If you want to do pricing research, right? You do Gabor Granger, you do Van Westendorp, fine. 2 questions, even 1 question. Brilliant. You get all the information you need. The tendency to go, let's ask more, let's do more, let's put
Sure.
more stuff in, gets very, very hard. So what I would say to brands, to cut a long story short, is trust the process that there are certain techniques that are bulletproof in quantitative, bulletproof. Share a wallet, NPS, love it or loathe it. They're bulletproof because they're practicable, and
Mhm.
you know that they can work. How you apply it, again, that's a different thing, different conversation. And similarly with qual to me is the most complicated skill in the research world because everyone assumes it's super easy. And it's
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 not.
not. I mean, it is. It's like video games, right? The Atari inventor had said a video game should be easy to pick up and really difficult to master. And that's every video game in the world. You get to the highest level of Tetris, it gets increasingly hard. And it's similar with Qual in that the grounding for what we do is the whole of the world of, literature, cultural analysis, all of that stuff. So you can't expect to learn it straight away. But
Mhm.
the grounding for that is important. You can do a 5-minute interview if you sort of know the techniques behind it, how to ask a question, how to interpret body language. NLP before had anything to do with the internet, neurolinguistic programming, all of these tools and devices we have and we know them. So yeah, trusting that process of
Sure.
I'd always recommend to brands, number one, if you're doing any type of qualitative research like that, trust your quality, go with them, be involved,
Mhm.
sit and listen. Don't sit there like it's, theater. Be involved in it. I think that's what people should learn from the report is that if you take the time, and again, this is 10 hours, it's not a lot.
Yep.
It's less than a day.
There is this entire idea of are you willing to think from first principles? And I think a lot of the things that you're mentioning right now, ask the questions, just observe, all of these really come from a willingness to go to that first principles way of thinking. So I do want to make sure that folks who are listening to this, who find this interesting, who want to reach out to you, how can they contact you and If you could tell us a little bit more about the work that you do and how can they find you, that'll be wonderful, Carl.
Absolutely. And thank you for the plug. TAGR is
Yes.
the company, and the website is tagrworld.com. That's where you can find us. But we set up, honestly, we wanted to be not like the anti-agency, but we didn't want to just be working or seen to be a research agency. Again, we very strong opinions as a team on what research actually means, and talking to customers and doing endless surveys. There's a place for it, but we don't necessarily believe that informs strategy as much as talking in depth with key customers or internal people. But what we want to do is to provide a really high standard of thought to inspire something else. We love the jobs that people hate, honestly, and a lot of research work is really, really hard. What we're focusing on is solving that problem that maybe everyone said couldn't be solved because they just
Mhm.
run out of patience or run out of time. We're like, no, we're going to stick with it because we love it, honestly. I mean,
And I
I
think
love
it
my job.
shows, Carl,
Yeah.
in everything you've shared with us today. It shows your passion for what you do and the curiosity that is behind
Yeah.
it all. Love this conversation. If you do get a chance to get your hands on the tattoo study done by TAGR, please go get one copy. When I opened it, I expected to read a report, but it feels like a page turner, almost like a human library in some ways.
Oh, thank
So I
you.
would strongly encourage everyone to go and check out that piece of study. It's unique and it's original. So hats off to Carl, you and your entire team. And thank you so
Pleasure.
much for taking the time today. I truly appreciate your time, your attention, and everything you shared with us.
And thank you.